Hello, hello. Welcome back to Mastering Thought. I'm Kristina Black, and here with me is my friend, Dr. Mark Waller. How you doing, Mark?
Fine, fine. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
Sure is. Winter is here. Not all. Well, I guess it's kind of fall-y winter.
You know, where we live, we both live in the same area for those that watching. We don't really get a lot of winter until in January.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not, last year was brutal. And I hope this year
Yeah,
is a little
last year was
better.
a rough. Yeah, for sure.
It was not
I've
good.
had I've had Thanksgivings with snow here, and I've had Thanksgivings with 75 and wear a tank top.
Right, right. Yeah, I used to ride a motorcycle, and a group of us would ride up to Glenville and eat
Oh yeah,
outside in December.
nice. That's awesome.
It was literally warmer in the mountains than it was in the valley. It was really weird. It's weird in December.
Yeah, that's awesome. So fun. So what do we have for today? I think we're continuing some thought watching info.
So yeah, our last two videos have been very popular, and I got some questions, and I got one question I want to kind of take off from this because this was very interesting. And if you remember the and this was not, I believe this was not the last session, but maybe the video before last. Anyway, we were talking about the thought watching exercise, and I thought before we went into this, I would just ask you, I would just take you through the exercise so people can see what we're talking about, kind of a frame of reference. And then I'll go to this comment that we got because it raises a very interesting question, which is a very common question. And so all you need to do to kind of kick this off is just, wait for the next random thought to go through your mind. And when I say random, I mean everyday thought, like, oh, I need to go to the store this afternoon, or, wonder what the temperature is going to be tonight, or whatever random thought goes through your mind. Take a step back and become the observer, and the instant you observe the voice in your head, tell me what happens to it.
Okay. Okay, it goes away.
It goes away. So,
Mm-hmm.
so when you direct your attention to the voice in your head, those networks in the brain switch that we talked about earlier, and the voice goes away.
Right.
Okay, so then we got this question, and I want to kind of go through it here.
Yeah.
So this person says, my question is this. What if you were actually abandoned by your mother and beaten down emotionally by your father, and your parents kept trying to be in your life after you had grown? I have thoughts. I do not want my parents to argue in front of my children. What do I do with my thoughts then? Now, this is really interesting because I wanted to, my first initial reaction when I read this was to get into all the details. And you'll see if you go through this, there's some interesting stuff. I mean, she says she was abandoned by her
Yeah.
mother, beaten down by her father. And so there's stuff to get into here. And that was my first inclination. And I realized as I was thinking about that, that's exactly what I should not do.
Mm.
Get into the weeds of all this stuff. I mean, there may be some, who knows what's really going on here. But the actual question is, what do I do with my thoughts then? And she's referring, as you see at the top here, she's referring to bad thoughts.
Yeah.
And I get this question all the time. And when I realized what the real question was, I went back to the video that was attached to the question, and of course the video was to do the thought watching on small, inconsequential everyday thoughts.
Right.
And obviously, either the person, this question was asked by the person's mother, so I don't know who actually watched the video.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they missed the instructions or misunderstood, but this is a question I get all the time. I take people through the process of thought watching, and then the next session, next time we get together, I find out that they're working on negative thoughts. And that is not the instruction.
Right.
And so in my own unique fashion, I've come up with a metaphor for this.
Okay. Let's hear it. I love your metaphors. They're always good.
Well, look at this. So,
Wow.
so this is a metaphor for the mind. Of course, the mind actually does not exist. The mind is identification. Because there's only an observer in mental activity, and we call our mental activity the mind. And so, in
Okay.
this illustration, you can see this mind, this metaphor for a mind, is just gigantic structure. Full of houses and rooms and all this stuff, and all those things represent all the negative thoughts, all the small thoughts, all the mental activities going on in this person's life. So, how's my metaphor so far?
I'm tracking. I like
Are
it.
you okay? So let's go back. Let's go back to the question. What do I do with my thoughts? Basically, she's saying, what do I do with my negative thoughts or my emotionally charged thoughts? And so this is the problem that most people run into when I introduce them to the thought watching exercise. The purpose of the exercise is to disidentify with thought, not to solve the problem of negative thoughts. And it doesn't matter how many times I say that, people naturally, and I would too, they naturally go to, okay, but how do I solve the problem of the negative thoughts?
Yeah.
Well, here's the key to this whole thing. If you look down at the bottom of this structure, there's a red rock balanced on a kind of a gray rock.
A little pagoda.
Right. Now, so I'm talking at the very bottom of the structure. See the red rock and the gray rock?
Yes.
Okay, so now our natural inclination would be to climb up into the structure with a great big, ball peen hammer or something and start tearing away at the negative thoughts. Do battle, just tear this thing down, right?
Demo day. Yeah.
Exactly. However, if we focus on the little thoughts, which are represented at the very bottom of the structure, you can see that all we have to do is give this thing a little push and the whole house of cards collapses. And so that's what we're doing with the thought watching. We're focusing on small, inconsequential thoughts because we're trying to disidentify from the voice in our head. We're not trying to solve the problem of negative thoughts. That would be laudable. That would be a great goal if we could accomplish it. But you can see we can do something far more easy and fundamental here by just going down to that red rock and giving it a little shove, and the whole thing will tip over. So this is what we're doing with the thought watching. We're not worried about all the negative thoughts. Even though we might be in a crisis situation, we're going to go down and we're going to do the disidentification on everyday thoughts, small, insignificant thoughts. And when that clicks, and when the light goes on in our head, that whole structure is going to keel over, and the world of thought is never going to be the same again. It's going to come apart.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that metaphor work?
Yeah, I think so. I'm curious if there's ever a point at which you get to working on the negative thoughts. Just because I think we talked about that a little bit at the end of last episode.
I'm just so glad that you asked that question, and the answer is you don't have to.
You don't have to.
Right, because see
Right. Okay.
what happens here is when you disidentify from the small thoughts, you rearrange your relationship with all thoughts.
Okay.
And so the problem is not a problem anymore. Your whole perspective on what a thought is and where it comes from completely changes.
Okay.
And so, and I know this sounds crazy. I just, trust me, I've been through this 1,000 times with people. And I know it sounds absolutely nuts. How could disidentifying from small thoughts affect all the big thoughts? Because you're fundamentally changing your relationship to thought itself.
Right. Well, I know for me, when I can start to realize, like, oh, these thoughts that are popping up, they're from a more primitive part of my brain that isn't equipped to deal with this. And so it's not really suggesting anything helpful usually. And so when those thoughts come up, I don't have to feel bad if they were like a surprisingly concerning thought. It's not, it doesn't really matter. It wasn't really from me trying to use my thinking voice in my head.
So your thinking voice in the head is exactly what we're talking about, though. See, there is no difference between the voice in your head that gives you a negative thought and the thinking voice in your head, or what we call me talking to me. It's all the same mechanism.
I think maybe I just said it wrong.
Oh,
I'm more meaning that when the voice is using me versus
oh,
me trying to use the voice,
got it, got it.
that that's when I put weight on which thoughts come up is when I'm trying to think.
So, so what happens in this process is, and you may already understand this, but I'm just going to go through this as if
Yeah.
there's a point to be made here, even if there's not, because somebody may be struggling with this. So
Mm-hmm.
the metaphor that I use when I explain this to people is that your mother-in-law never shuts up, but eventually you stop listening.
Okay. So it's kind of like the thoughts.
So, so you
Mm-hmm.
before you do the thought watching, you wake up in the morning and you have this thought, I'm going to have a lousy day. And you're like, oh, God, another lousy day.
Mm-hmm.
After you've done the thought watching and you've disidentified, you wake up in the morning and the voice says, I'm going to have a lousy day. And you're like, oh, well, that's interesting. And you just go on with your day because you
Right.
know that that voice is not you and you don't care anymore.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You don't pay it any credence at all.
Yeah.
And that's what happens to all these negative thoughts is they lose their relevance because the world
Yeah.
of thought is not of interest to you anymore.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So so ironically, you don't have to go work on the negative thoughts once you've gone through this process.
Mm-hmm.
And like you
It's
were
more,
saying, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say like maybe it's more like um that when the thoughts come up, they're not startling to you anymore. You just don't care.
That's right. And
Yeah.
that voice in your head feels like it's other. It feels like it's a foreign object.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to get to that in a second.
Okay.
So and then you also, the other thing you realize, and this is huge, is as you said a few minutes ago, is when you have a negative thought, you know it's coming from your limbic system. And you
Mm-hmm.
know it's related to early childhood emotional learning and it has no application in your current circumstance.
Right.
And so my experience with this is I've had numerous people, many people, under enormous stress, anxiety to the point where they can hardly function, years and years of depression, relationship problems that they can't solve. It's all coming from this dialogue in their head. And the instant they realize, wait a minute, I'm not the voice in my head, they go free of that whole thing. And it's not unusual for them to get symptom release in the moment this happens.
Mm-hmm.
Did I say relief or release? Symptom relief.
Yeah.
So the symptoms just go away.
Yeah. Wow. So easy.
And it's extremely easy and it works very quickly. Somebody asked me yesterday, okay, so if I start through this process, how long is it going to take? And I say, well, the first big step is understanding what this is and why it's so important, and that takes some
Mm-hmm.
time, maybe a week or
Mm-hmm.
two. But the rest of it is, we're talking days, not weeks.
Mm-hmm.
This is not months of work. This is very easy.
Yeah. So just 2, 3 times a day for a few days, and that should be enough to lead to an awakening in 2 weeks. Is that the idea? The
Exactly.
mental awakening?
See, if you remember, I don't know if you've watched that Eckhart Tolle video, but in the Tolle video, he says the first awakening comes from recognizing there is a voice in your head that talks all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the instant you recognize that voice and you know it's not you, then there is an awakening that occurs. It's an emotional, psychological, and spiritual awakening that happens in a very
Mm-hmm.
short period of time. Sometimes in the moment, sometimes over a few days. Very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So would that like expand to different things like I've heard people talk about ego death and things like that. Does that even like help do that too? Since
That
I
is the
don't
ego
know,
death.
the awakening is an ego death.
Yes,
Okay.
right. Because the voice in your head is the ego talking to you. It's coming from the limbic system. It's all about survival. And when you think about this and get to the bottom line, my limbic system wants to live, and if you die, that's okay with me.
Yeah. Right. It's just yeah, dog eat dog, part of the brain.
That that's right.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is the death of the ego. Now there's more.
Okay.
There's more here. There's more of the death. There's more death because then there's a self that's left that we think we are, and that's going to lead us into some other sessions, some other programs where we will talk about non-duality and things like that, because there's another step in the awakening.
Okay.
But the initial step is realizing that you no longer have to identify with your own mental activity. It's something
Right.
completely independent.
Yeah.
Okay, are we ready to
Yeah.
move on, or do you have another question or a comment?
No, I think that's great. I think that kind of helps me with the problem I've had. I don't know if any other people have had the same problem, but just of wanting to make it too hard,
Right.
wanting to make it more complicated so that you can like earn a bigger result or something.
That's right. And that's really interesting that you're saying that, because there is a whole group of people that want to be good enough and smart enough, and by
Yeah.
golly, people love me, just like Stuart Smalley.
Stuart, yeah.
And so when they start into this, they overthink it and try to accomplish something.
Yeah.
But there's no volition here. There's nothing to accomplish. There's nothing to be achieved. You just separate from a thought and watch it go away, and that's it.
Hmm.
And it's
Yeah.
hard to understand that it can be that simple.
Yeah. But it can,
So let
for
me go on
sure.
to something else here. So this is another response I get. I introduce
This
them
is
to this. I show
hard.
them how to, and they say it's hard. This is hard.
Hmm.
You know
Hmm.
why they're saying this is hard?
Because they don't realize how easy it is.
Well, of course. And they're looking at this.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
See, they're looking at this bulwark of nonsense that's going on, that's screaming at them in their heads, and they're thinking this is hard.
Yeah.
But it's not hard. All they have to do is the exercise. They don't have to conceptualize how big the problem is. This is not about solving the
Right.
problem. It's about doing an exercise.
Yeah, it's not about how big or complicated the house is. It's about pushing the red rock.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
That's
just walk
exactly
right
right.
up and give a little shove.
And so it's really, and I totally understand when people tell me, when I used to have an office, I would say, well, it's hardest for you to get in the car and drive to my office. This exercise is not hard. It's easy.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
it's hard for us to conceive of things that are easy,
Yeah. Because it's
because once
supposed to be
once
so
we see
profound.
this, we're living with this every day for years and years, and we think, oh no, this is going to be really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is it distracts us, and then we don't actually do the exercise,
Mm-hmm.
which is, you know, tragic.
A pity. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
not hard, it's easy, as long as you allow it to be as simple as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the next thing. They say to me, it doesn't work, the thoughts just come back. And when you do the thought watching, you'll notice you direct your attention to the voice in your head, it goes away, and then it starts up again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Silencing the voice is not part of the exercise.
Mm-hmm.
We're separating from the thought. All we're doing is taking a step back and noticing that we're thinking, and the instant we do that, the voice goes away. The
Yeah.
fact that it comes back is not part of the exercise.
Mm-hmm.
We don't care.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you mentioned that last time because I was a little confused and probably said it like, oh, okay, you do this and it makes it go away. And
Right.
that's when you corrected me, well, you can do it, but it's still going to come back. You just know that it's not you.
Right. And so the idea here
And
is
it will
not,
quiet down. It will be quiet more often.
but
Sorry.
the, right. And the thing people need to understand is, especially initially, the voice is not going to quiet down.
Hmm.
We're doing, it's going to come back and it's going to keep talking, and but the exercise itself is just that momentary interruption.
Right.
And of course, then the illusion is that the objective is to make the voice become silent, and that is not the objective.
Right.
The objective is to come to the realization that that voice is not you.
Hmm.
Now, once that happens, then things tend to get real quiet.
Hmm.
And you notice how all these problems come from the way we make assumptions about things.
Sure. Yeah. Right. The meaning we put to things.
Right. So how are we doing so far?
I feel good about it.
Do you? So this is
Yeah.
clear?
I think so. I think I'll have I repeated everything back accurately?
Yeah, I'm making sure, I want to make sure, because see, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to describe somebody else's mental process.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm using my words to describe their process, and there could be a complete disconnect there. So I've got to find a
Yeah.
way to describe it so they can relate to it.
Yeah. Well, and I would say too, for anyone listening, if you're not sure about anything about it, I don't know, just you can write a comment to us. Mark and I do look, and that way we can make sure that it's clear. Because if you're confused, there's probably other people confused too.
Yeah, and we'll do everything we can to clarify it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
including, perhaps having somebody on with us to ask the questions. Because one of the things, the feedback I'm getting, and I think you're getting it too, is having the two of us discuss this is much more powerful than just somebody lecturing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it's 2 points of view, 2 ways of saying things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, let's see what I got next. I think what I have next is something you've already commented on. So these are three things people do that are really counterproductive. First, they talk back to the thought. So they're driving down the road, and the voice in their head will say, oh, that dog looks like a border collie. And they'll say back to the voice, that's not my thought.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're not me. Okay, now why is that counterproductive? Let me show you. Remember this diagram?
Yeah.
So in this diagram, the voice is being... Oh, my thing is not working. Let me see if I can make it work real quick here.
Sure.
Anyway, I'm drawing on my screen and it's not coming up. But you
Mm.
notice over there at the default mode network, the blue circle, that's where the voice is coming from.
Right.
So when you observe the voice, you're turning on the task positive network, which is the pink circle.
Mm-hmm.
So you observe the voice, the default mode network shuts down, the voice goes away. Now if you talk back to it, what's happening is you're turning the default mode network back on.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing you just turned off just came back on because you started talking to yourself again.
Right.
So that's why that's counterproductive.
So you're really just trying to think to yourself, like, that's not my thought.
No, you're not trying to think to yourself that at all. That's the whole point.
Well, I thought that's what you're saying with the prefrontal cortex is that's the observer. That's
All
is
you're
that handle the
all
task positive network?
no, all you're doing is you're telling yourself, you're directing your attention to the voice in your head.
Yeah. And just then the response is that's not my thought.
But you're not. No, that's not the response.
Oh, I'm having a thought.
No, no, that's the whole point I'm trying to make. Is you don't talk back to it in any way. The instant you direct your attention to it, it goes away, and that's the end of the exercise.
Okay. Okay.
So So if you talk back to it and say, that's not my thought, then you're trying to take control of this somehow and add something to it that doesn't belong there, and it's actually counterproductive.
Mm-hmm.
Without exception, the people who have struggled with this are the ones that are re-engaging. So
Yeah.
so you just very passively, you're like an observer. It's the sun and the clouds are going by, and the cloud goes by and the sun burns up and the clouds just go away. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
And the sun is the awareness. So the awareness of the thought makes the thought go away, and that's the end of the exercise. There's no more mental manipulation.
Okay. Just observe and then shut it down.
You just notice it, and the fact that you're noticing makes it go away, makes it stop.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I mean, shut the experiment down or the exercise down.
Right, right, right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. So,
Yeah.
so one of the things that's kind of a stumbling block is people want to get in and do more. So
Mm-hmm.
they go in, they say, "That's not my thought. That's not me." Whatever they're doing, but that mental activity is actually defeating the purpose of the thought watching to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So less is more.
Okay.
I know this sounds crazy that it could be so simple.
Well, I've already experienced a couple parts of it, I think. So, like a couple stages of what you're talking about. So it doesn't sound crazy to me. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing out on any part of it.
You just notice your mental activity.
Mm-hmm.
There is a voice narrating your experience. And the instant you notice it, because of the way the brain works, it goes away. And that's the end of the
Yeah.
that's the end. That's it.
Yeah. Got it.
See, this is really helpful that you and I are having this discussion, because this is exactly where people get hung up.
Mm-hmm.
Because they think they
The
need to be
FAQs.
doing something,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and there's nothing to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Okay, where are we? Oh, we talked about that. Okay, so let's go back here. The other thing they do is they analyze the thought. Oh, where did that thought come from? Why am I thinking that? Is that the right
Mm-hmm.
thought to have? And they get all up in their head without realizing that the whole purpose of the exercise is to get them out of their head.
Get out of your head. Yeah.
And so the analysis really, and there's some people, and I know people like that. They're analyzers, and
Mm-hmm.
they're just in there all the time.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that are the most difficult for me to work with, because everything I say, they go up in their head and they start a dialogue and, well, what does that mean? And, they don't even know they're doing it. It's that second nature.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I could see it.
Now that's not you or me. We don't do that.
No.
I recently had a client who was a super analyzer. And he finally conceptualized what this was all about and had a major break. His whole life has changed. Completely changed. It's amazing to watch.
So
Okay,
cool.
let's go back to the list. The other thing is they look for an outcome. And they say, well, you told me, that I would have this awakening experience and nothing's happening. So, because they're looking for an outcome. Can't look for an outcome.
You just have to do the experiment,
That's right.
exercise, and just let it be.
That's it. That's right. Yeah. And what's interesting is they'll come into my office or we'll get on Zoom and they'll say, okay, well, I haven't had a major breakthrough. And then they'll spend 40 minutes telling me how their life has changed.
Ah, interesting.
Because they'll expect this outcome. And I'm guilty because I tell them that they're going to have an aha moment. And then they do the exercise and then they're looking for the aha moment. Where is it? It's got to be
Yeah.
here somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's a stumbling block as well.
Yeah. So you can do it, but just don't, yeah, don't wait for the outcome, I guess. Just do it
Well, yeah, you don't have
and
any
let the outcome come to
expectations.
you. There you go.
No expectations. You just do the exercise. What you're doing is you're rewiring the front of the brain by turning on the observer up here. And when it's ready, it'll happen, but you can't look for it because,
Ah.
again, you know,
Well, that makes an interesting point because if you are making new neural pathways and it takes repetition to, I don't know if I'm saying this right, I'm not an expert, but if it takes a few times to make the pathway groove deep enough or connected enough or whatever, then of course your skill can develop as your brain develops.
and what happens in addition to that is the moment that connection gets made, there's a big change. It's an immediate connection that's made, and it's a lot like, I think I mentioned this before. You're looking at one of those pictures and it says there's a monkey in the forest, and see if you can find it, and you look and you look and you can't see the monkey, and eventually all of a sudden you just see it. That's the way this is.
Okay.
But some people have a quieter path to this, and that's okay too.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm wondering if that's maybe what I'm having because I have definitely had an improved um, experience day to day with the thought watching, but I haven't felt like something suddenly changed everything.
Right.
So, yeah, I'll just keep doing it and we'll just see what happens.
Exactly. You just do it with no expectation. You know, it's like taking a pill. You go to the doctor and the doctor says, "Here, take this pill. You'll feel better in 3 days."
Mm-hmm.
So you don't every time you take the pill wait to see if you're going to feel better. You just take the pill.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So now and you alluded to this, and I'm glad you did because I wanted to bring this up. Here's another thing: is people think they already know,
That their
and
thought the thought voice in their head is not them
they
or
they think that they went to the ashram and they had a mystical experience. They practice mindfulness with some great leader, and so they think they got this,
hmm.
and so they don't actually do the exercise because they think they already know,
Okay.
and that's an ego trap.
Mm,
Now they may already know, But you realize that people who already know don't have to tell you that.
Mm,
So that's a telltale
interesting. Yeah.
sign right there.
Yeah. Well, and really, if for me, even if I didn't have um, an awakening coming to my future, it's such a simple exercise. Like I maybe spend less than 2 minutes a day doing it, like maybe even less than a minute,
Right.
and it
Exactly.
makes my brain quieter for a bit. So
Yeah.
I like
Well,
that.
that's something I hear all the time. People, will connect and they'll say, I say, how you doing with the exercise? And they'll say, well, I've had a really busy week.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, did you take a shower? Oh, yeah, I took a shower. Well,
Did you think while you were in there?
yeah, that's exactly. People are, they're interesting. So, where does this lead? This leads to a moment where you disidentify, and we talked about this in the last section, where you disidentify and that voice in your head speaks. And when it speaks, you all of a sudden realize, wait a minute, that doesn't even feel like me anymore. That's not me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is you. It feels like it's a third party.
Mm-hmm.
So the voice in your head says, "You look really good today," and you're like, "Huh? Who's that?"
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't feel like you anymore. That's what
Mm-hmm.
disidentification is. So then from that moment on, I want to introduce this before we end today. You become a subject versus an object. So you are the experiencer versus the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what does this mean? What this means is, I've got it down here. It says, I am my thoughts, or am I experiencing thoughts? Am I my
Uh-huh.
thoughts, or am I experiencing thoughts?
Mm-hmm.
That's the distinction. So once you disidentify, you know you're the experiencer of thoughts. You're not your thoughts.
Okay.
Am I my perception, or am I experiencing a perception? Well, you're the experiencer of the perception. You are not the perception itself.
Mm. Yeah.
Am I a feeling, or am I experiencing a feeling?
Right.
So what happens is you become the subject and everything else becomes an object in awareness.
Mm.
So your thoughts are objects that you can look at. The voice in your head is an object. Your
Mm-hmm.
perception of what's happening is an object. So you can examine it. Whereas when you identify with all this mental activity, you can't examine it because you think it's you.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore you're trapped in your thoughts, your perceptions, and your feelings.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
So who are you? This is a question I get all the time. When people realize they're not the voice in their head, they'll look right in my eyes and say, okay, if I'm not the voice, who am I?
Mm.
And these are things we're going to explore on this channel. You're the awareness that's watching. You're not the thinker, you're the knower of the thinking. You're the watcher, not the thinker. You're the awareness
Mm-hmm.
that's watching. And so it frees you out of the prison of thought.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know that's a little esoteric.
Uh, maybe, but it's hidden somewhere because I work on babies in my practice, and one of the things that I had picked up from a podcast about it was that when you start working on a baby, you look at them and for your own self, you tell them in your head, like, I know who you are. You're
Mm.
a person with sentient, like, you're a sentient being who is here to live and experience a life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's no problem to say that blanket statement about somebody else. I just had never thought that I'm not different.
Right.
That like I think I try to get too much in the weeds with the question, who am I? But really, it's like I'm someone who experiences things. I am a
Right.
thinker. I am here to live a life and have experiences. Like it doesn't have to be complicated. That's who I am.
So, so the question is, are you Kristina or are you the story of Kristina?
I guess I'm the story of Kristina. No,
No.
I'm Kristina. Dang it. I'm experiencing the story of Kristina
That's right.
as the experiencer.
And
Okay.
you are not the story.
I'm not the story.
You are not the story of you. You are something much, much greater than that. You're the awareness that's experiencing the story.
Hmm. Yeah.
Now, when you do the thought watching and you wake up, there is a sense of that immediately.
Mm-hmm.
See, and you realize I am aware of thoughts, but I'm not made of thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yeah,
aware of
that.
feelings and sensations, but I'm not made of feelings and sensations.
Right.
And it frees you. It frees you from the constraints of the mental activity that we
That
brought
this
with us.
gives. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Now, you have to admit this is a more powerful metaphor than the guy climbing the tree the other week, huh?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I'd really hate to be that guy's neighbor, by the way. Just to look up that house like blocking your sunlight and it might fall on your house. It's kind of freaky.
Yeah, that's AI generated, by the way. Probably
So cool that
everybody
you
in the
can do that.
audience knows that.
I didn't even know about it till you told me about it.
Yeah, I
So,
was up at 5:30. Actually, I was up at 11:30 last night, thinking I wanted to get this metaphor of a cotter pin, and if you pull the
hmm
cotter pin, but the AI just would not understand the concept of a house sitting on a cotter pin. It just wouldn't come through. So
yeah. Well, it's a good thing that idea wasn't you, that you were just experiencing the idea.
that's that's right. Oh,
Well, I think that gives me the good next few things to think about. I'm curious about questions anyone in the audience is having. So, yeah, if there's any part of that that doesn't make sense, or if you are experiencing like success and moving through the steps, please share.
that would be nice to. That I had two clients that had an awakening experience watching the last two videos, or
Hmm
two of the last three. They suddenly
Yeah,
realized what this was all about, and boom, they woke up.
so cool.
So hopefully, some audience members have had that and reach out to us and in the comments, and we'll respond and we'll follow up with you.
hmm Yeah. And if you know anyone who's a prisoner in their own head, please send them our videos.
Yeah, please like and subscribe. That we really want to get this word out.
Hmm So good. So good. Well, anything less left on our topics?
No, I don't have my slide about my books, so I could shamelessly promote my books. I before we go ahead, an interesting experience. I am having my book, The Lion and Unicorn, The Dance of the Lion and Unicorn, narrated right now for
Mm.
Amazon for Audible,
Yeah.
and I
Is
got a
it you or
long.
is it someone from Amazon?
No, you hire a narrator, somebody who does this professionally,
Oh, okay.
and there's lots of reasons why I didn't do it myself. It just takes time, and you know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Well, you've got a full practice right now too.
yeah, and there's some other things you have to do it right, and they have a whole technical thing you have to anyway, and it's not
Yeah.
that expensive, so it was a good move. And I hired this guy. His name's Martin. He's great. And I yesterday I got a long email from him about how much he's enjoying the book. He's narrating the book,
That's so cool.
and how much he's enjoying the book, and how he realizes he's a unicorn, and he gives me the whole history of his relationships, and he's having this, epiphany about how all this works, and it was really interesting.
Amazing. You're
Yeah,
like, Martin, you should narrate my next two books too.
that may happen. We'll see.
I love it. That's so cool. Well, I can't wait when it comes out.
All right.
Okay. Well, everybody, have a great weekend or whatever part of your week you're in, and we will see you next time.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.